Strangers, every group has someone who insists on doing things the hard way. That friend still paying for a subscription they forgot they had, that one refusing to update their phone because it still works, and now, that one who's somehow still overpaying for wireless in 2026. Mint Mobile is here to help you with that last one. Stop paying way too much for wireless just because that's how it's always been. Mint exists purely to fix that. We got a Mint Mobile plan for Monty, and it's great. It has everything they need. Great coverage, great speed, without the bloated price tag. I'm starting to wonder why I haven't gotten myself one yet. Seriously, what am I doing? Mint has the premium wireless you expect, unlimited talk, text, and data, but at a fraction of what others charge. And for a limited time, get 50% off 3, 6, or 12-month plans of unlimited premium wireless. Bring your own phone and phone number, activate with eSIM in minutes, and start saving immediately. No long-term contracts, no hassle. And with a 7-day money-back guarantee and customer satisfaction ratings in the mid-90s, Mint makes it easy to try it and see why people don't go back. Ready to stop paying more than you have to? New customers can make the switch today, and for a limited time, get unlimited premium wireless for just $15 a month. Switch now at mintmobile.com/strange. That's mintmobile.com/strange. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 a month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Over 50 GB may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. Additional terms apply. See mintmobile.com. What drives a person to turn their anger outward? How long can one blame one's past for one's present shitty behavior? When is it time to take accountability? Welcome to Strange and Unexplained with me, Daisy Egan. I have been known to hold grudges way past their expiration date. The older I get, the less I hold on to. But in my younger days, I could hold on to perceived wrongs with an iron grip. I think I might have been happier if I'd been more willing to let things go. Today's story highlights how holding on to perceived wrongs can poison one's outlook and how letting them go can set you free. Gary Christ was an asshole. I'm just going to start there. He was born in 1945 in Aberdeen, Washington. Christ's parents, James and Aileen, moved Christ and his older brother to Pelican, Alaska, where James was a salmon fisherman. Christ would later claim his parents would leave him and his brother for months at a time in the summers when they went out fishing. His parents corroborated this, but said in their view there were plenty of people in the community willing and able to look after the boys while they were away. Whether or not this was true, the impression it left with Christ was that nobody wanted him, and it seems even when his parents arranged for childcare, Christ wasn't impressed. He recounted a tale about firing a loaded shotgun above the head of his babysitter once because of her, quote, bossiness. This theme would repeat throughout his life. If he didn't like something, he took it out on those around him. As for his having access to a loaded shotgun, this, it seems, reflects the general loosey-goosiness of his parents' approach to parenting. They didn't think Christ's penchant for petty theft when he was young was that big a deal, but by the time he was a teenager, Christ's petty theft had turned into stealing cars and boats. At 14, he was put on probation for 7 years and ordered to pay $936, the equivalent of about $10,000 today, to a man whose boat he'd stolen. By the age of 18, Christ was at the Utah State Industrial School, a reform school which I'm sure was not at all an awful place and was committed to actually helping young men reform and not just screaming at them and making them scrub toilets, at best. In 1963, while at the reform school, Christ stole a bicycle, I believe in an attempt to escape, but was nearly caught in that attempt, so he leveled up and stole a car and fled to California, where he tried to enlist in the Air Force, but was denied because of his criminal record. And so he did the next most logical thing and stole another car. This time, while trying to flee, Christ got into an accident and was arrested upon waking up in the hospital. He received a conviction of 7 years in the Deuel Vocational Institute in Tracy, California, but ended up only serving 1 year of that sentence. In 1965, Christ met an assistant nurse named Carmen Simon, and the two married. Their honeymoon phase was cut short, however, when Christ landed himself back at Deuel for, can you guess it? Stealing cars. Check this out. 6 months into that stint, Christ tried to escape with another inmate. That attempt wasn't successful. However, the next one was, and less than a month after his first attempted escape, he was working in Boston for MIT as a cryogenic technician under the pseudonym George Deacon. This guy was the Forrest Gump of criminals. Also, for someone who doesn't like that movie, I sure reference it a lot. Anyway. By 1968, Christ and Carmen had had 2 children, and despite the very real trauma Christ had felt by being temporarily abandoned by his parents for months at a time while he was growing up, Christ decided to pass that trauma down to his own children by sending them and Carmen off to live with her parents in California and to act as though he were dead. Christ then did something very out of character. He bought a car. He'd finagled a referral for a job at the Institute for Marine Sciences in Miami, bought a blue Volvo station wagon, and drove down to Miami to begin the next phase of his life as 28-year-old George Deacon. I have no idea why he aged himself 3 years, but that's what he did. On September 23, 1968, while on a research trip for the Marine Sciences Institute in Bermuda, Christ met Ruth Eisman Shire, a 26-year-old graduate from the National University of Mexico. She was one of just 2 women on this expedition of 34 people. The pair took a liking to each other. Christ claimed to have divulged all his secrets to Ruth while on the trip together: his real name, his real age, and his criminal record. Ruth, it seems, wasn't fazed by any of these revelations, not even by the half-baked plan he'd told her about that he'd come up with a man he'd done some time with to kidnap someone for a large ransom. So unfazed was Ruth, in fact, that over the next 10 weeks, the two continued planning the kidnapping together. According to Christ's own account, in order to find the perfect victim to kidnap, he went to libraries pretending to be doing research for a thesis on the personalities of the rich. He took a list of 40 Miami millionaires down to 3, using a 10-point scale of his own devising, which consisted of looking at the closeness of the family, religion and piety, having 10 times more liquid capital than the ransom ask, a daughter at or above average intelligence who lived or went to school in an area with minimal risk of getting caught during the abduction, family stability, expanding financial situation, wealthy relatives, his position in the community, owning a large corporation or part of one. All these factors narrowed the list down to one person. At that moment, 20-year-old Barbara Jane Mackle had no way of knowing her life was about to be forever changed at the hands of 2 extremely dangerous people. Strangers, I recently realized the throw pillows on my couch looked like something someone might use for under their knees when they're gardening. That grimy, too. What am I doing? I'm an adult. I can have cool stuff. So I took myself over to Wayfair and treated myself to a couple of super cute bright throw pillows that make it look like I know what I'm doing with my life. I also got myself a wall-mounted magnifying mirror with a light because I was tired of checking myself in the car mirror and realizing I had 80% more eyebrows than I thought I did. Wayfair has something for every room and every budget, from your kid's room to your home office to your kitchen. Also, now that my kid is taller than me, we're gonna need a bigger couch. I've got my eye on just the one at Wayfair.com. Get organized, refreshed, and back on track this new year for way less. Head to Wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's Wayfair.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. Robert Mackle and his brothers owned a real estate company called Deltona. Since World War II, they had built more than 30,000 homes in southern Florida. The company was worth $65 million. That's roughly $600.4 million today. The family was friends with Richard Nixon, who had just recently won the presidential election. Indeed, Nixon's winter White House was at the Mackles' Key Biscayne property. Robert and his wife Jane's daughter, Barbara Jane Mackle, was about 20 years old in 1968. She was attending college in Georgia at Emory. For high school, Barbara attended Everglades School for Girls, where she would get the Smith College Award, National Educational Development Test Award, be inducted into the National Honor Society, be elected class president, and graduate as valedictorian of her 17-girl class. It was an exclusive school. In short, she was extremely smart and very well achieved. With their target set, Christ and Ruth set about perfecting their plan. They'd need a place to hold Barbara while they waited for the ransom her wealthy father would no doubt pay. I suppose the logistics of keeping her quiet in a motel were too complicated, and I guess they didn't have access to anywhere more private, so they did the next most obvious thing. They built a capsule in which they would bury Barbara alive. Paraphrasing Christ's own words from his prison memoir, Life, The Man Who Kidnapped Barbara Mackle, made of 3/4-inch thick plywood with waterproof glue and glass fiber and an epoxy bonder that could repel water for a week, the capsule was completed on December 10, 1968. There was a trap door through which they would lead Barbara into and out of the capsule, and another door that led to where the various equipment needed to keep her alive was kept. The doors were not waterproof. There were a few vents built in for air, which were covered with screens to keep out bugs, snakes, and rodents. There was a battery to power lights inside the capsule, as well as a fan to circulate air. Barbara was scheduled to come home from college for Christmas break. Christ and Ruth buried a ransom note on her family's property and planned to grab her when she got there. But you know what they say about the best laid plans. Something about mice and men, and something's always going to happen to change everything. Just before Christmas break, Barbara came down with the flu. So rather than come home, Barbara asked her mother to meet her in Atlanta. On Friday, December 13th, 1968, Jane Mackle checked into room 137 at the Roadway Inn Motel. Interesting choice for such a wealthy family. It was the kind of motel that had vibrating beds called pleasers, Pleezers. One wonders if the Four Seasons was all booked up. Barbara was so sick, apparently, that the folks at the school infirmary told her to just go home early. So she met her mother at the motel with the vibrating bed. Christ and Ruth checked into the Roadway Inn under the names Dr. and Mrs. Johnson Rarick from Boston, but for some reason moved to a different motel the next day. Maybe the Roadway was too cheap? Despite the flu, Barbara insisted on going back to school the next day, December 14th, for her American Civil War final. Upon walking back to her car on the return to the motel, she got an uneasy feeling. According to her memoir, 83 Hours Till Dawn, she reflects, quote, "I was scared. I don't know why. I hate to say it. It wasn't a premonition. Not really. I just had this peculiar, funny feeling," end quote. Who knows where intuition comes from? The universe? Ourselves in the future? Whatever it was, Barbara's intuition, it seems, was right. Just a day after that funny feeling, at 4 a.m. on December 17th, there was a knock at Barbara and Jane's motel door. Now listen, hindsight is 20/20, but there is never a reason anyone should be knocking at your door at 4 a.m. According to a Time magazine article that came out about 2 weeks later, the person identified themselves as a police officer investigating a car accident. In her book, Barbara would later recount telling her mother to not answer the door. She wrote, quote, "I don't know why I said it. I just didn't want her to open the door. I had one foot out of bed on the floor," end quote. Jane, of course, would blame herself for what happened, as anyone would, because she opened the door. Later, in her memoir, Barbara would write, quote, "I saw the gun before I saw the man. I don't know who turned on the light. As Mother unbolted the latch, the barrel poked through, and at the same time, the man flung open the door. Mother didn't open it. He pushed it open. I don't know much about guns, but it looked like a rifle to me." End quote. Barbara thought the second person was a boy around the age of 15, though her mother Jane put his age closer to 12 or 13. This, of course, was Ruth. Initially, the women thought they were being robbed. The intruders tied Jane up and took Barbara. It was when she heard the other person first speak that Barbara realized it wasn't a little boy, but a woman with what she described as a Spanish accent. Now, you might be asking yourself how on earth they knew Barbara would be at the Roadway Motel. At least I was asking myself that. The following article ran the next day in the AP. Quote, 20-year-old co-ed Barbara Jane Mackle, daughter of a wealthy Florida land developer, was kidnapped in her nightgown from an Atlanta hotel early today by a shotgun-wielding duo, her mother told DeKalb County Police. Mrs. Mackle reported that her daughter, a junior at Emory University in Atlanta, was taken at gunpoint after the kidnappers gained entry by claiming to be from a police agency. The account of the incident was given by Mrs. Mackle in a complaint of kidnapping at gunpoint released by police to the news media. End quote. Upon reading this, Barbara's econ professor called the FBI to tell them that he had spoken to a man the Saturday before who said he was looking for Barbara. He described the man as being around 6 feet tall, 240 pounds with a beard, and a woman around 5'1" with a pixie cut. When the professor told the man that it was finals, he heard the man say, "Then we can't find her in class." Later that afternoon, he saw the same man using a payphone and heard him tell the operator he was looking for Barbara Mackle because it was an emergency. Listen, the 60s were a different time. I have no idea how or why the operator knew Barbara was at the Roadway Motel, or why she would tell a complete stranger that information, but here we are. Anyway, the pair took Barbara to a wooded area outside of Atlanta. They took a picture of Barbara holding a sign that read "kidnapped" and mailed that, along with the opal ring she always wore, to her father. According to her book, Barbara was taken to a hole in the ground. Quote, "He sort of sat me up on the ground. My feet were dangling over the side into a hole or something. I want you to slide down in there," he said, and he was pressing down on my shoulders. Up until then, I thought it was a room, certainly a place big enough to stand up and walk around in. He put me down and he said, "Now straighten out." For the first time, I could actually see. There was a light in there. It wasn't a passageway. It was a box. I was shaking. I was terrified. I was never so frightened in my life. I guess I became hysterical. I cried, "No, no, no, you can't do this." And very calmly, the man stood there and said, "Don't be such a baby." Suddenly, the top came down. It made a heavy thud. I could hear him screwing in the screws in the lid. Then I heard the dirt. I heard it falling. There are no words to describe it. End quote. Stranger, when I tell you that I can't, I mean that I cannot. I have gotten more claustrophobic in my old age. We watched Alien again recently, and I was more freaked out by the guy having to crawl through the air vent than I was by the titular alien. The thought of being buried alive inside this thing is just too much for me to bear. But Christ and Ruth weren't monsters. Sure, they buried this young woman alive, but they left her with an Airbnb-style welcome letter. It read, quote, "Do not be alarmed. You are safe. You are presently inside a fiberglass reinforced plywood capsule buried beneath the ground near the house in which your kidnappers are staying. Your status will be checked approximately every 2 hours." End quote. Oh, okay, cool. I don't need to be alarmed. Just buried underground in a box. Thank goodness. Quote, "The capsule is quite strong. You will not be able to break it open. Be advised, however, that you are beneath the water table. If you break open a seam, you would drown before we could dig you out." Your life depends on the air delivered to your chamber via the ventilation fan. This fan is powered by a lead-acid storage battery capable of supplying the fan motor with power for 270 hours. However, the use of the light and other systems for only a few hours, coupled with the higher amperage drain, will reduce this figure to only 1 week of safety. Should the air supplied prove to be too much, you can partly block the air outlet with a piece of paper. A muffler has been placed in the air passage to prevent any noise you make from reaching the surface. If we detect any commotion which we feel is dangerous, we will introduce ether to the air intake and put you to sleep. Use of the light, when not necessary, will cut your battery safety margin substantially. If you use the light continuously, your life expectancy will be cut to 1/3 of the week we have allotted you before you are released. Your capsule contains a bucket for refuse and the products of your bowel movements. The bucket has an antibacterial solution in it. Don't tip it over. The lid seals tightly to prevent the escape of odors. A roll of wax paper is provided. Use it to prevent solid waste from contaminating your bed. Kotex is provided should you need it. Blankets and a mat are provided. Your warmth depends on body heat, so regulate the air to prevent loss of heat from the capsule. A case of candy is provided to furnish energy to your body. Tranquilizers are provided to aid you in sleeping, the best way you have to pass the time. The ventilation system is doubly screened to prevent insects or animals from entering the capsule area. You risk being eaten by ants should you break these protection screens. We're sure your father will pay the ransom we have asked in less than 1 week. When your father pays the ransom, we will tell him where you are and he'll come for you. Should he fail to pay, we will release you, so be calm and rest. You'll be home for Christmas one way or the other." End quote. Be calm and rest? Oh, okay, I'll just be calm and rest. When I tell you that I would take all the tranquilizers and then kick up a huge fuss to get all the ether pumped in there? To make matters worse, yes, they did get worse, the light bulb burned out after about 4 hours. Barbara was now left in the dark. As she groped around in the dark, she noticed everything was getting wet. There was a drip coming from above her. She wrote, quote, "In that first hour or so in the box, I would just get control of myself when the fear and the dread and the panic would start building up again. It came in waves. I could feel it coming. And when I lost control, I'd grit my teeth and beat as hard as I could. I could get good leverage, too. And I would brace myself and strain as hard as I could. I clenched my fists and beat very deliberately. Maybe some air would come in, some water, some daylight. After a while, I calmed down again." End quote. Barbara claims to have counted the seconds in her head in those first 2 hours, though Lord knows how she did that while trying to break free. But humans are pretty incredible under pressure. And despite the promise in the note after counting out the 2 hours worth of seconds, no one came to check on her status, which of course made her wonder if anything written in the note was true at all. Indeed, Christ and Ruth would not be checking in on Barbara because they were driving to Miami. Barbara was totally and utterly alone. Strangers, right now it's snowing on top of the 3 feet of snow we got over the weekend. And the weather is just the tip of the iceberg, if you will. Everything feels extra hard these days. But Factor makes mealtime easy. Quality, functional ingredients, including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats. There's no refined sugars and no artificial sweeteners. They have meals that fit your goals and schedule. Healthier eating, calorie management, more protein. There's 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh and delicious through winter, including high protein options, calorie smart options, Mediterranean diet, GLP-1 support, and ready-to-eat salads. Everything is always fresh and never frozen and ready in about 2 minutes with no prep and no stress. I love Factor for lunch. It takes the stress of deciding, prepping, and cooking out of my hands. Head to factormeals.com/DaisyEgan50off and use code DaisyEgan50off to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. New subscribers only, varies by plan. One free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active. While her daughter was going through the first few hours of this harrowing ordeal, Jane had tried to free herself from the ropes she'd been bound with back at the hotel. Failing that, she managed to hop her way out into the parking lot and over to her car, where she honked the horn until she got an employee's attention. Apparently, though, the employee was no help, and Jane ended up calling the police herself at 4:11 a.m. For some reason, Barbara's father, Robert, wasn't contacted about his daughter's abduction until 5 a.m., and then by Barbara's friend, Stuart Woodward, who lived nearby. I don't know why Jane contacted Stuart, but Stuart told police he'd seen a blue late-model Buick or Oldsmobile hanging around the area. And then, at 9:10 a.m., Robert received a call telling him to, quote, look under a palm tree in the northeast corner of the house, under a rock about 6 inches down, end quote. There, Robert found a ransom note. It read, quote, Sir, your daughter has been kidnapped by us, and we now hold her for ransom. She is quite safe, if somewhat uncomfortable. We offer no proof of our possession of her at this time. It will arrive by mail in a few days. Barbara is presently alive inside a small capsule buried in a remote piece of soil. She has enough food and water and air to last 7 days. At the end of the 7 days, the life-supporting batteries will be discharged and her air supply will be cut off. The box is waterproof and very strong fiberglass reinforced plywood. She has little chance of escaping. The box is in an unusual and lonely place. She has no chance of being accidentally stumbled upon. Contemplate, if you will, the position into which this puts you. If you pay the ransom prior to the 7 days, we will tell you of her whereabouts. Should you catch the messenger we send to pick up the ransom, we will simply not say anything to anyone, and ergo Barbara will suffocate. The messenger knows only one of us, and he will report to us via radio from the pickup site. We will immediately know his fate. Should you catch all of us, we will never admit anything, as to do so would be suicide, and again she will die. As you can see, you don't want to catch us, for to do so would be condemning your lovely and intelligent daughter to death. End quote. The ransom demand was $500,000, more than $4.5 million in today money, and they were very specific about the money itself. Quote, the notes must not be older than 1950 issue. No more than 10 notes may have consecutive serial numbers and not be merely shuffled. The notes must be Federal Reserve notes of standard configuration. No more than 1/2 of the notes may be uncirculated. No form of marking on the bills is acceptable. The bills will undergo a minimum of 8 hours of intense examination before we allow you to have knowledge of the subject's whereabouts. End quote. The specifications about the size of the suitcase in which the money should be transported were also extremely detailed. The note also detailed how and where the money should be dropped off and warned that, quote, any deviation from this outline would result in your death, end quote. By 9:45 p.m., just over 12 hours from the time Robert got the phone call telling him where the ransom note was, he had secured the money. It was the second largest ransom amount in U.S. history. The Mackles placed a personal ad in the Miami Herald as directed by the ransom note. It read, quote, loved one, please come home. We will pay all expenses and meet you anywhere at any time. Your family, end quote. This let the kidnappers know the money was ready and the exchange could be made. The note had warned not to get the police involved in the money exchange, but the FBI quietly wired Robert's car. At 3:47 a.m. on December 19th, his daughter gone for 2 days, Robert received a call with more detailed instructions for the money drop-off. But the instructions were convoluted, and Robert was, understandably, panicked. He couldn't find the drop-off site and communicated to the FBI through the mics they'd placed in his car that he couldn't find the spot and didn't know what to do. So an agent suggested he just leave the suitcase on the bridge. I don't know if it was even the right bridge, but I do know that the instructions had been to follow a blinking light and place the suitcase inside a small metal box with a light on it. There was no box on this bridge, or at least Robert didn't see one. So, following the FBI agent's instructions, he left $500,000 in a suitcase on the bridge and drove away. And so, around 4:45 a.m., the kidnapper called to see why Robert missed the drop. It was Robert's brother Frank who answered the call. He explained that Robert had had a difficult time finding the drop location. Frank was told to tell Robert, quote, that it's halfway up the causeway on the right-hand side, the box. You have to go halfway out to the island and put it in the box. Tell him there's no light on it now, end quote. So, Robert went back to the bridge, but wouldn't you know it, the suitcase full of money was gone. So, here's the thing. While the FBI had been made savvy to the plans for the ransom drop-off, the Miami-Dade police had not. So while this was all taking place, Dade County Officer Paul Self and Miami PD Officer William Sweeney were on patrol in the area. First, Self saw 2 cars parked at the Miami Seaquarium. Obviously, this was odd. It was the middle of the night. It turns out those were 2 FBI vehicles placed near enough to the drop-off point to be able to monitor what was happening. But Officer Self didn't know this. All he knew was that it seemed like something fishy was going on at the aquarium. I'll see myself out. And then, about 2 hours later, he noticed a car in a blocked-off residential area whose residents had been complaining of burglaries. The car was vacant. It was a 1966 blue Volvo station wagon with Massachusetts plates. At this point, Sweeney came to provide backup and check out the car. Sometime after discovering the vacant Volvo, Self and Sweeney saw 2 people approach the Volvo carrying something. Spotting the officers, they ran, and Sweeney chased them. He saw a carbine rifle in the man's hand and shot at him, missing him. Both people got away, but not before one of them dropped a duffel bag and suitcase. The duffel had scuba gear inside, and the name Ruth Eisman painted on the side. The suitcase was holding $500,000 cash. The Volvo was registered to a George Deacon who used to work at MIT, but now worked at the Marine Institute. In the back of the car, they found 3 suitcases, a metal trunk with the name Ruth on it, a zipper case with a key to room 153 at the Roadway Inn, a notebook with bonded paper containing the ransom note, ammunition for a shotgun, buckshot, carbon rifle ammo, a 20cc vial of xylocaine hydrochloride, a painkiller similar to lidocaine, hypodermic needles, a checkbook with the names George C. and Dorothy Deacon, and a blank passport application. They also found Ruth's wallet that contained 2 Honduran passports and a U.S. passport, a learner's permit, her student IDs from the University of Mexico, and her class schedule from the University of Miami. They also found plane tickets under the names G. Deacon and A. Post for the 20th, one-way flights to Vegas via Chicago. Finally, there was a Polaroid camera and a photo of Barbara with the kidnapped sign. In this photo, Barbara's eyes were closed. Once Robert learned about the Miami-Dade police's bungled attempt at catching the people responsible for his daughter's disappearance and now her life, Robert went to the press. He placed ads in pretty much every local media source, newspapers, radio, and TV, that read in part, quote, "I had nothing to do with the action Thursday morning of the Miami police who tried to arrest you and recovered the money which I left for you. I regret that you did not get the money because my only interest is the safety of my daughter. I pray that you have not harmed my daughter. I did everything you told me to do, and I had nothing to do with the accidental appearance of the Miami police on the scene. Please contact me again through any channel. I will do anything you ask, so my daughter will be freed." End quote. A local Miami resident named Charles Guillon heard about the chase and ransom money on the radio. The report mentioned the Volvo, and he remembered buying a trailer from a man with that exact car the night before. He reported this, including information about some letters he found inside the trailer addressed to a man named Chris, who was in prison in California. In the stack dated a year later were letters addressed to George Deacon from the same person. Police pulled fingerprints for both Christ and Deacon and determined they were one and the same person. Christ himself was in the middle of trying to get refunds for various flights he'd bought for himself and Ruth as part of their getaway plan, which was apparently changed when the Mackles pulled the ransom together much quicker than he'd anticipated. He bought the flights under aliases, because duh, and so when he showed an ID that read Charles Deacon for a ticket he'd bought under the name Schultz, the ticket agent was like, "Da fuck?" Christ explained that his father was in trouble with the law, so he'd used a fake name to protect himself. Meanwhile, Ruth had boarded a Greyhound bus headed for Houston. At 12:47 p.m. on December 20th, switchboard operator Tricia Poindexter at the Atlanta FBI office received a call. It was Christ with information as to how to find Barbara. When she tried to transfer him to an agent, he insisted on only giving the information to her. According to records, he said, quote, "I want to give you some information on the Mackle girl. I want to give you some directions on how to find the capsule. I'll give this to you one time." End quote. And true to his word, he dictated the instructions and asked if she was sure she'd gotten them, and then hung up. It took another 3.5 hours for agents to find Barbara. At around 4:12 p.m., one of the agents was kicking at a pile of leaves and saw some freshly dug red clay. Barbara could hear the people above her and began pounding on the box. The agents dug with their bare hands. Why they hadn't brought shovels to the site where they'd been told someone was buried, I can't say. Strangers, if you know one thing about me, it's that I love my sleep and I take it seriously. And in order to get a good night's sleep, you need a good mattress. It's literally the foundation of sleep. Better sleep changes everything. Your mornings, your mood, your energy. And I love that Avocado makes that upgrade tangible with real materials designed for comfort, breathability, and a healthier home. I love that Avocado doesn't take synthetic shortcuts. Real organic materials feel better, breathe better, and hold up, so your sleep support lasts night after night. Choosing organic, sustainably sourced materials means you're making a healthier choice for yourself while also supporting cleaner, more responsible production. Avocado mattresses are built to last with durable, high-quality materials. It's an investment in long-term vitality, not a short-term fix. Plus, they have sleep trials of up to 1 year to ensure you're getting the best mattress for you. When it comes to what you sleep on, Real wins. Real is better. Go to avocadogreenmattress.com/strange to check out their mattress and bedding sale. That's avocadogreenmattress.com/strange. avocadogreenmattress.com/strange. It was 4:32 p.m., 83.5 hours after being buried, that Barbara was finally freed from the box buried in a hole in the ground, the size of a shallow grave. She had spent 4 days and 3 nights in what was almost her actual grave. She struggled to walk and had lost about 10 pounds. When they showed her pictures, she immediately identified both Christ and Ruth. Meanwhile, with his name in the papers and likely a nationwide manhunt for him, Christ was hustling to get out of the country. He bought camping gear and nautical maps and, most importantly, a boat, an Orlando Clipper. He also bought 2 15-gallon tanks, hoping it would be enough gas to get him to the Bahamas without having to stop to refuel. The man he bought the boat from, Norm Dix Oliphant, called the FBI to report the boat sale. He told them the man, using the name Deacon, had also paid for a 10-day permit to store his rental car. Deacon paid for all of this using $20 bills. His escape plan was to head for the Cross-Florida Canal via boat, head 300 miles into the Gulf of Mexico before shutting off the engine to sleep, replace the Florida registry numbers with Texas ones, head to Galveston, head up the river to Austin, and meet Ruth at a YWCA there. At 10:30 a.m., at some point along this serpentine escape route, police found the boat and Christ, but Christ sped off. A helicopter, an Albatross, followed. Christ made a sudden turn nearly 180 degrees, ran the boat aground on Hog Island, and fled into the swamp jungle. In his boat, they found a duffel bag stolen from a veteran with $479,000 of the ransom inside. Just after midnight on the 22nd, Christ was found hiding in some mangrove roots. He was apprehended at 12:10 a.m. on the 22nd. By this point, Ruth had made it to Houston, where she had already secured a job as a nanny and live-in maid for the Woolfolk family who, fun side note, apropos of nothing, had specifically advertised for a Latin American maid. Okay. Ruth worked for the Latin American maid-loving Woolfolks for 6 weeks, using the name Irma Hilga Sanchez. She told the Woolfolks that she was from Laredo, her mother died, and her father was an alcoholic. Why they needed all this information, who knows? Clearly, they didn't do any kind of background check on her at all. Maybe she was just having fun making up a fake history for herself. The FBI, meanwhile, had no leads on where Ruth was, and so on December 28, 1968, Ruth became the first woman ever to be put on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Ruth's mother in Honduras had no idea where her daughter was and was appropriately mortified upon learning what she'd been up to. So mortified, in fact, that she wrote to Barbara's mother. Quote, "When the shocking news reached me, I just could not believe it to be true. For 12 days and nights, I did not sleep or take a complete meal. I just could not. Ruth had suffered a lot in her 26 years. Lost her father when she was 3 years, and soon afterwards, her sweet baby sister, Erica. I felt so sad when Ruth left, and ever since I had been so depressed, as if I had felt unconsciously that some terrible event was coming. When Ruth was with me and anything she did turned out wrong, she immediately said, 'Mommy, forgive me.' Now that only God knows where she is, alive or dead, I want to do the same in her place. Barbara, can you forgive Ruth?" End quote. Both Christ and Ruth, in absentia, were charged with the federal crime of conspiracy to kidnap. Christ's bail was set at $500,000, and he was sent to Dade County Jail, where he quickly began building a case for insanity. When he was speaking about the kidnapping, he would refer to himself as the kidnapper. He claimed to be a paranoid schizophrenic and said he had killed 4 people. How he thought he'd get away with this with 0 medical records for backup, I don't know. As for Ruth, well, they'd have to find her if they wanted to convict her. By February 9th, Ruth was in Oklahoma City, staying at a YWCA, rooming with a woman named Donna Sue Wilkes. Ruth stole Donna's birth certificate and Social Security card and headed to Norman, Oklahoma. She would eventually apply for a job at Central State Hospital, and part of the application was a required fingerprinting. And then, for some reason, instead of just backing out of the job application, she let herself get fingerprinted and then stole another woman's purse with her ID, planning to flee using that woman's identity. And so, on March 5th, a fingerprint tech for the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation was doing routine checks of fingerprint cards sent to her from Central State Hospital in Norman, Oklahoma, when she grabbed the card for Donna Sue Wilkes, a female aged 18. The left index finger, quote, seemed to be easily identifiable. I have no idea what that means. Like, these people process thousands of fingerprints, but for some reason this one fingerprint was easily identifiable? Anyway, the fingerprint tech was like, hey, wait a minute, this fingerprint seems awfully familiar. She pulled Ruth's card, compared it to Donna's, and wouldn't you know, it was a match. I guess Ruth hadn't fled using the new fake identity because she was apprehended and taken in, and pretty quickly confessed to the kidnapping. And despite Chris's note to Barbara assuring her well-being and safety whilst locked and buried in the box, according to Ruth, there were no such assurances in reality. Part of her confession, in which she refers to Chris by his alias George Deacon, read, quote, "To my knowledge, no provision of any kind was made which would permit the victim to escape from the capsule in the event Deacon and myself had been killed in an automobile accident or some similar tragedy. Therefore, I pleaded with George to let me stay with Barbara, and he could buy milk and some apples for me, and I could stay in the woods. The only concern Deacon had displayed about the welfare of Barbara after placing her in the capsule had been in making several phone calls prior to digging the hole so he could get detailed weather information." End quote. Interestingly, Ruth also claimed, quote, "I would like to point out that during this entire ordeal, Barbara Mackle was very well behaved, quiet and cooperative. She at no time cried out and appeared to remain calm throughout the ordeal." End quote. Remember that Barbara herself would later claim in her memoir that she begged and begged to not go into the box once she realized it was indeed just a box in a hole in the ground. It's interesting to me that Ruth felt it necessary to, I don't know, defend Barbara's honor in this way. Weird that the expectation is that even while we're being kidnapped and buried alive, the proper decorum for a lady is to be well-behaved, quiet, and cooperative. Anyway. On January 23, 1969, both Christ and Ruth were indicted by a DeKalb County grand jury on kidnapping for ransom. But Gary Christ was busy trying to convince everyone that he was crazy. So in March, he began what would be a 27-day hunger strike, although in his book he claims it was a 47-day hunger strike. Quote, "Since I was overweight anyway, I decided to fast for a couple of months and attribute my refusal of food to the delusion that someone was trying to poison me. I felt that such insane behavior could not fail to convince the most prejudiced psychiatrist." End quote. After 3 weeks of fasting, a doctor found him to be in good health, so he decided to stop drinking, too. After day 27, he, quote, "faked a collapse from dehydration in order to prevent damage to my kidneys," end quote. At this point, he allowed them to give him some water, but still wouldn't eat. A week later, he faked another collapse, so they tried to force a feeding tube. He was then sent to a psychiatric ward. He had also threatened to put his foot in his toilet and his finger in the socket. One day, he was seen going into the shower with wet socks tied tightly around his neck. Christ eventually dropped the act and the insanity plea, and his trial began on May 19, 1969. The prosecution presented a list of 330 potential witnesses, but prosecutor Richard Bell would call just 74 people. Barbara was the last witness called. Ruth pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of simple kidnapping and was sentenced to 5 to 7 years in prison. On Monday, May 26th at 9:50 p.m., the jury came back with their verdict, guilty with recommendation of mercy and life imprisonment, despite even the judge being like, this dude is never going to change and should be killed. But that would not be the end of Gary Christ's story. Barbara Mackle was seemingly uninterested in the usual fame that comes with being the survivor of a kidnapping plot. Aside from the few interviews with the press that she gave, she co-wrote a memoir titled 83 Hours to Dawn, and then did her best to fade into obscurity and lead as normal a life as she could. Gary Christ, on the other hand, had different plans. Listen, this guy was smart, okay? There's no getting around that. But he was also an incredible narcissist and an all-around fucking asshole. I mean, that goes without saying, but he really thought the sun rose and set out of his own asshole. His book is filled with statements of grandiosity and the typical rantings of a smart person who clearly thinks they're even smarter than they actually are and can't stand it when everyone around them doesn't acknowledge it. And look, you know me. I'm no fan of the prison system, but in his 1972 book, Life, The Man Who Kidnapped Barbara Mackle, he wrote, quote, "As I write this, I have been in total isolation for nearly 2 years. No doubt what I did to Barbara was cruelty, and I had considered myself above cruelty in my self-deception, but it was nothing compared to that which is inflicted daily on thousands of convicts," end quote. I mean, okay, I can see how one could make that argument. I don't know if I agree. I have never been incarcerated, nor thankfully buried alive in a box in the ground, but, he'd been in prison before the kidnapping, so he knew that kind of cruelty already. Wouldn't turning around and inflicting it on someone else be even more cruel? That's like an inmate turning around and becoming a corrections officer. And as if what he'd done to Barbara wasn't enough, he then had the fucking gall to write to her after her memoir was published. In this letter, he wrote, quote, "You were chosen from a list of 41 young women on the basis of emotional stability, intelligence, and record of religious belief. I felt you were the one woman of means in the Miami area who would not suffer any lasting damage due to rigid confinement in a small space. Of course, my crime was evil, immoral, and cruel, and I cannot excuse it, nor do I expect anyone else to excuse it. I don't deserve forgiveness, but it would make me happy to receive it. The real violation of morality lay in the willingness I felt to harm you, to save me. That attitude is cowardly," end quote. Girl, tell it to your therapist. Also, he explained that the reason he needed the money was to get plastic surgery to reconstruct his face so that he could, I assume, continue to outrun his previous convictions. He also said as much to the parole board. He was basically like, "I only did this to get enough money so you guys couldn't catch me and hurt me anymore." What a dick. Christ was paroled on May 12, 1979. He went on to become a physician, which is, to me, terrifying. That any person you come across in your daily life might have done something so awful, or worse. It's bad enough thinking the person ringing you up at the grocery store might have committed murder. It would be 1,000 times worse to learn your fucking doctor once buried a woman alive in a box in the ground. But I've spent way too much time focusing on him than he deserves. Aside from the few interviews and the memoir she co-wrote shortly after surviving the ordeal, Barbara kept out of public life. She has lived a very normal and private life. She claimed to have suffered no lasting psychological damage from the 83 hours she spent inside that box. It was her remarkable level-headedness that kept her going. In her memoir, she reflected, quote, "If he was going to let me die, he wouldn't have gone to all this trouble. This box and this fan and everything. If he wanted me to die, he would have just killed me, right? Maybe he won't come back, but he'll tell somebody, and somebody will come and get me out. But what happens if something happens to him? How will anyone know I'm here? There are just the two of them," end quote. She would sometimes think she would just shut off the fan and let herself suffocate, but would always change her mind. Quote, "What if they find me in time and I'm dead already? And Mom and Dad and everyone finds out I've turned off the battery," end quote. Barbara Mackle and her kidnapper were diametrically different people. Both were very smart, no doubt. But where Barbara managed to use her intelligence to excel in school, Christ used his to manipulate and harm people for his own gain, and then blame everyone around him when things didn't go his way. He was a narcissist who clearly saw other people just as an impediment or a means to get what he wanted. I have a hard time believing that Barbara suffered no psychological trauma during the 83 hours she was buried alive. If that's true, she is a stronger woman than I, though, frankly, I think that's pretty obvious anyway. In the end, Barbara Mackle stripped her kidnapper of his power. If the tables had been turned, he would no doubt have used this event as an excuse to harm others, or at the very least, he would have harped on about it and played it for sympathy for the rest of his life. I mean, he tried to use his own prison sentence to get sympathy from his victim. Barbara Mackle, on the other hand, was basically like, I don't know her, when asked about any lasting damage she might have sustained. The other guy can bitch and moan about how unfair life is. Barbara Mackle, on the other hand, it seems, chose to just live a good life. Checkmate. Next time on Strange and Unexplained. In 1973, two young children were out exploring when they came across a very unusual being. Sam the Sandown Clown. Strange and Unexplained is a production of Three Goose Entertainment and Grab Bag Collab. This episode was written by me, Daisy Egan, with research by Keely Hayes, editorial help from Becca DiGregorio, and sound mixing and engineering by Jeff Devine. Music by Epidemic and Blue Dot Sessions. If you have an idea for an episode or want to submit a question for an Ask Me Anything episode, head to strangeandunexplainedpod.com and fill out the contact form. I will write back. Eventually. I need an assistant. You can follow me on social media at Daisy Egan or follow the show at SNU Pod and Grab Bag Collab. Stay strange.